Welcome to Your Hunger Satisfied, where we discover what you are truly hungry for and learn to satisfy those deepest cravings so you can end emotional eating once and for all. Are you tired of feeling guilty every time you eat your favorite foods? Do rigid food rules and labels like good and bad have you feeling guilty about your eating choices? I totally get it. I get that navigating a positive relationship with food can be challenging. As I was thinking about my own journey and how different it is nowadays than it used to be, I thought about all the guilt that I used to feel. I know that guilt takes a toll on your physical and mental health, affecting your overall quality of life. However, as I pondered guilt and how different it is for me now than it was back then, I realized that guilt can have a positive impact on me as I progress on my journey. Take a moment and let me know where and when you are watching this. So today I'm going to uh, talk about the negative aspects that we are all familiar with, I'm sure. When you feel guilty about your emotional eating, your thoughts may become consumed by self criticism, negative self talk. I know it did with me. How about you? I always end up beating myself up over indulging, overeating, or whatever after a bout of emotional eating. I noticed over time when I was beating myself up, when I'm feeling guilty, this guilt actually served a purpose. This mental preoccupation with guilt actually diverted my attention away from the original problem that I was trying to cope with. My focus shifted from the argument to remorse, self blame. I was no longer thinking about that argument, the incident that got me angry, the loneliness, or whatever it was. That's what prompted me to eat. Instead, the focus shifted to self criticism. That was my go to pattern to, avoid addressing the issue that was the cause of my overeating. It was a great way to distract myself from what was really bothering me. It allowed me to remain focused on the problem and not even to realize that I needed to focus on a solution for the original cause, the original reason that I was eating in the first place. I noticed that I utilized other avoidance strategies as well, which is actually what told me, such as excessive TV watching, endless scrolling on social media. The guilt contributed enormously to a vicious cycle of emotional eating. I felt guilty about overeating in response to the stress, which of course triggered more emotional stress. This in turn led to additional emotional eating episodes, perpetuating the cycle, making it even more challenging to address the original problem. The vicious cycle further eroded my self esteem, my self confidence, making it difficult for me to confront and resolve that issue that originally prompted me to eat, turn to food for comfort. Feeling like I lacked self control to manage my emotions exasperated my feelings of guilt and self doubt. I had a client, Amber, a student overwhelmed by academic pressures. She turned to her favorite food, pizza, to cope with the stress. The guilt that followed the pizza binge made everything worse, prompting her to eat more pizza to get rid of that guilt. This pattern continues, leaving her emotionally drained, caught in a never ending struggle with both guilt and emotional eating. We worked together to help her face those issues that she was using food to avoid dealing with, namely, her fear of failing out of school and disappointing her parents, who she felt had very high expectations of her. Guilt surrounding eating habits can significantly erode one's self esteem and confidence. Individuals may start doubting their ability to make healthy food choices or to manage their emotions effectively. This persistent self blame and negative self talk that accompany the guilt can further deteriorate your self image, making it difficult to confront and resolve the original issue. This continues to perpetuate the cycle. Another client I had, Lisa, was a mother who found comfort in sweet foods whenever she was feeling overwhelmed with family related stress. Over time, this guilt gnawed at her self esteem. She began to see herself as weak willed, incapable of handling her emotions without resorting to food. This led her to develop a negative self image, which is what brought her to see me. So you can see how the vicious cycle develops and continues. Guilt's all consuming nature often devotes our cognitive resources away from problem solving and addressing that underlying emotional issue. Instead of actively seeking solutions, we become trapped in a loop of rumination. The thoughts continually circle around the guilt, around the negative emotions, the self blame, and hampers our ability to effectively address the original issue that perpetuates, that gets us caught in that rabbit hole of emotional eating. All of this is easily reinforced unhelpful coping mechanisms such as emotional eating, endless scrolling of social media, excessive TV watching, as well as other addictions such as gambling, shopping, etc. Guilt can solidify the belief that emotional eating is the only effective way to cope with difficult emotions. Individuals become reliant upon food as a coping mechanism, even if it's not healthy or effective. It makes it challenging to explore healthier alternatives for managing our emotions. Breaking free from this cycle necessitates a fundamental shift in mindset and a willingness to explore healthier coping mechanisms. For example, Emily, another client of mine who turned to sugary snacks when dealing with stress at work. The guilt that followed her, she was constantly going to the break room. The guilt taught her that food was the one relief. I mean, this guilt becomes a self perpetuating cycle. The problem is it's effective because it distracts us. Now, as I said earlier, I realized as I was moving forward in my own journey, I realized how guilt around eating can have both positive and negative effects on our relationship with food, our well being mentally and physically, our own physical health. One of the first lessons I learned about using guilt in a positive manner was it helped me learn moderation and self control. I know. Bear with me and pay attention because that was actually the key. I began to pay attention to exactly what I was thinking at the beginning of what I called that spiral into that negativity rabbit hole. What were those initial thoughts? It began with recognizing the issue that I was trying to avoid. I was able to start naming it, that loneliness, that boredom, that fatigue, that argument. Then I would turn my thoughts to what food sounds good. And then I was often running into the rabbit hole, spiraling my way downward. Keep in mind, it initially worked. Stuffing myself, I no longer thought about the problem. It was only after paying attention to my initial thoughts that I was able to identify the feeling, the initial issue, that I began to learn moderation and self control. I began to pay attention. I began to moderate my intake and to exercise self control. I learned to become more self compassionate. Instead of judging myself, beating myself up, I started becoming more aware of my thoughts. I decided that if I was going to consciously binge, I would start by making more nutritious. Yes, I continued to binge, I just made better choices. I began to educate myself about healthier food options, develop better eating, if not habits, at least choices. I also began writing down my choices and giving myself credit for those small changes, those healthier choices when I did binge. The writing down what I was eating so I could see the reality of my choices. This enabled me to stop the denial. Thanks to being more self compassionate, it was easier to admit to myself that I needed and wanted to make the necessary changes, to be able to make those necessary changes. I began to journal those thoughts and emotions so I could begin to deal with those issues that were driving me to binge. Identifying and beginning to process those emotions helped me develop greater emotional awareness and control without the judgment, without getting lost in the guilt. Over time, I learned healthier ways to manage my emotion and to implement healthier strategies that gradually replace the emotional eating. Keep in mind, this journey was a process. It was not a sudden change in lifestyle. Until next time, make it a joyful week. Oh, I did want to bring up that thinking of changing the date and time of these lives so that I could get more interaction. I'm learning how to do these, so I want to be able to dialogue with you. So I'm thinking of changing them to Thursday morning or Monday. I'll have to give that some thought. So I'm expecting at the beginning of October to make a change. I'll keep you updated and we'll go from there. And that way I could look and see the comments people are making and learn how to respond to them in a timely manner or at the end of the live. So, like I said, until next week, make it a joyful week. See you later.